microphones muted in order for the audio to be heard clearly. During the meeting, both those present and online, only one person speaks at a time, and they must be recognized by the chairman. Many people speak at the same time, combined with background noise, make meetings like this impossible to hear on Zoom. This rule will be strictly enforced. For people utilizing Zoom, you will need to utilize the chat function to be recognized by the chairman. To be recognized with the chat function, you must be either a presenter who is on an agenda or a resident or business owner of East Hempfield Township who wishes to comment on an agenda item, where you must text your name and address. Your request to speak will then be passed on by staff to the chairman to be recognized. The steps to utilize Zoom are simple. Request recognition by the chairman via chat to speak. Once recognized by a chairman, unmute your microphone. After receiving recognition, speak. When done speaking, mute your microphone. For Zoom, any violations of the mentioned rules will be deemed to be acting out of order, and your microphone will be muted immediately without warning. Continued violations will result in you being electronically removed from the meeting. Robert's rules apply for those attending the meeting in person. All voting tonight will be done by roll call vote to ensure all votes are properly accounted for. Roll call will be conducted by a township manager. There will be no action taken on any non-agenda, non-emergency, non-urgent nature that arise during the meeting. Any such items will be referred to staff and will be handled at a later meeting. East Hempfield Township public comment will apply for all public comment. Perfect example of background noise. You must be a resident or business owner of the township to speak. You must identify yourself by name and address before speaking and sign the guest log for meeting minute purposes, or follow the chat function procedure already discussed for Zoom attendance. Comment is limited to 3 minutes and must be about the agenda item being discussed, with the exception of public comment at the end of the meeting for non-agenda items. No action will be taken during the public comment period for any non-agenda items, with all issues now referred to staff. We ask for your patience and understanding. We strive to continue serving the residents and businesses of this township while fully complying with social distancing requirements prescribed by our governor. So with that, we'll now move on to our first agenda item. Please join me for a moment of silence and the pledge. Now the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Our first item today is a fire police swearing of Cameron Herzog. So Cameron, if you can come forward here, please. So if you could please raise your right hand. I state your name.
Cameron Herzog,
You solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support,
I will support,
obey, and defend
defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the Commonwealth,
Constitution of the Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties
I will discharge the duties
of the fire police officer
of the fire police officer
in East Hempfield Township,
East Hempfield Township,
Lancaster County with fidelity.
Lancaster County with fidelity.
Congratulations. So, welcome. So if you could get your signature there. I'm gonna sign that, right?
Yeah, he would sign that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can get another one back
Yep.
there. You can stay for a second. So welcome, and we're glad you're coming on board. It's important that we have fire police. And it's very nice and selfless service of what you're doing to helping and assisting the township. So thank you. Welcome on board. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item. The item is the consent agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is to approve routine items that usually require very little debate or discussion. And so with that, we'll open up the consent agenda to the board for discussion.
Reviewing the photographs at the Landis Poultry Barn, I'm really frustrated that the engineer is drawn out there to inspect when there is absolutely no evidence of effort to prepare and do what is required for that inspection. And we reduced the escrow, which I'm concerned takes some incentive away from the applicant really getting the place in proper order for approval. I don't know if there's a way that we can have some additional funding or charging or fees or something to have this prepared properly.
I think you're the only one that knows what you're, so could you elaborate a little bit more?
We had photographs shown of the inspection by David Miller Associates to reduce the escrowed money for the project that was done at the poultry barns on Colebrook Road. And they show, like I said, no evidence of effort to prepare and manage these facilities in the way they are required to be managed, even after they are approved and inspected going forward over the years. They just won't function if they're allowed to deteriorate, as is shown in the photographs. I've seen this before on other projects where the engineers called out for final inspections and they're absolutely not ready. It's just a matter of calling them out and going through a process, and apparently an effort to get the escrowed money reduced, but that doesn't get the job done. So I share that, and I just would think we should have some way to discourage property owners from not maintaining their facilities.
I think maybe for an educational perspective, Mr. Hayne, don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you talk about this project a little bit, please?
I don't see him.
He's up there. Yeah, he's coming out.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. What I do agree with your frustrations, so Mr. Lefevre. We are, when we receive a request from the applicant per the MPC, we are required to go out and process a reduction. If we don't, they'll get all of their money back, everything, every dime of it. So we are required to go back, but it is frustrating when we go out and clearly the items aren't completed. Often what we see happen is on a yearly basis, they'll get a renewal notice. And then that's when they send us a letter saying that they're done, and we go out and things aren't done to that level. We do try in the cost estimate was prepared by the engineer. There are line items within that identify different improvements. We do try to stick to that. If those line items have been completed, we do reduce or recommend to you a reduction of those items. The one thing that we do try to do to provide encouragement is, I don't think I have a copy. Yeah, here it is. There is a 10% contingency that's part of the original estimate. We keep that at 100% of that 10%. We don't release that as we go down to try and create a little bit of extra leverage to get them to do the work. And I guess that's about what we're allowed to do per the MPC. And we try to keep it proper so that there aren't any opportunities for them to appeal it. And like I said, in turn, get all of their money back without completing the improvements.
Well, I thank you for what you do. And I know it's difficult for you also. So I just raised the point that we're conscious of the fact that you're needing to put extra effort out for the owners that don't really prepare properly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to speak along that line too. I've gone out and done many a reduction myself, and there are some owners that if they are like a professional developer or something like that, and they are on above a board professional developer, when you get called out there, they're ready for it and stuff like that. When you get the small lot projects where it's a homeowner, a farm, a small business, and this is not something they do for a living, you do have a tendency of having multiple visits to occur on what should be just one visit. It's just the nature of the beast, and some people take it more seriously than others. And that also factors into and becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up question. Is this a case of the facilities were installed, but they're not being maintained? And so now it's more of a maintenance action?
This particular case, I believe it's a lack of stabilization. So it would sort of be both. Like everything was rough graded in and may have been seeded, but the turf never took off and some of the other areas. And because of that, then there's erosion and then there's sediment buildup. And so it's sort of a combination. Wasn't stabilized in the first place and then wasn't maintained after that. Or it's very difficult to maintain something that wasn't stabilized and is continually eroding.
There was also driving of vehicles on areas that were disturbing them that wasn't part of the plan and
Correct.
really was unsatisfactory.
Yeah. As Mr. Russell had said, I wish I could say this was a one of a kind, but it's not. In particular with the ag applications, we see this a fair amount.
Okay.
Any other discussions of the consent agenda at this point? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Motion for Mr. LaFever, is there a second?
Second?
Second for Mr. Weaver. Mrs. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next, we're going to move on to our action items, and first is Development Services, and up first is 791 Stony Barry Road, approval of modification number 5. Mr. Beck, if we could start off with you, and then the applicant's engineer is here to talk to.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. For you gentlemen tonight, is a tabled item from the January 20th board meeting. The board tabled modification number 5 related to the driveway separation distance and clear sight triangle. Part of that reason was to ensure that the developer execute an agreement to remove a tree on the neighboring residential property. Included in your packet is a letter from Catalyst Commercial Development, signed by Catalyst Commercial Development and the residential property owner, where they reached an agreement to remove the tree. That tree will be removed as part of construction. Am I correct, Mr. Miller?
Yes, that's correct.
And with that, the developer is before the Board of Supervisors for approval of modification number 5 to grant a modification to the driveway separation distance. Where they will have a proposed 111-foot separation distance and a 63-foot clear sight triangle. And that clear sight triangle would be 63 from the eastern portion of the property. It would still be 100 feet for the remaining portion to the west. It is recommended for approval by Township Engineer, and staff supports this recommendation.
Just a couple quick questions, and we'll turn over to Mr. Miller here. Since we've never before really had issues where we have granted relief in this area, the developer basically has addressed the concerns that we had by entering into agreement with the neighbor, removing the tree that was of site obstruction, and now is able to comply with our sight line requirements of the township's ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just wanted to get that on the record. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Good evening. Andy Miller with Ritu Associates here on behalf of Catalyst Commercial Development, the applicant. Mr. Beck's introduction there was my entire statement, so I will not repeat that again with you. But you're correct, Mr. Russell, that the ordinance requirement for stopping sight distance is met with regard to the driveway in question that John has on the screen. We do have 100 feet clear on the western side, but the reduction of 63 foot is simply due to the limitations of the driveway location and the way the property line comes in at a skew, as you can see there, and where we need to get our driveway lined up. So that's the only reason. Last meeting, or in the meeting rather, in January, there was extensive discussion about the tree on Mr. and Mrs. Geist property that Catalyst then reached out to them and has an agreement with them to remove that at the time of site construction.
So basically, what you're stating is you're able now to fully comply with the stop and sight distance requirements of our township ordinance.
Actually, we were always complying with the safe stopping site
Okay.
distance requirement. It was simply the driveway offset and the clear sight triangle requirement that we needed relief from.
Right. But in this situation, your safe stop and sight distance works
Yes, it does.
per
work.
ordinance.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes, with no large obstruction in the way.
All right, so you're not asking for any relief related to safe stopping sight distance at this point.
That is correct. No modification to that ordinance requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yes, that we would, again, back before you and look for your vote on that so that we can move forward with buttoning up final items on the plan. Thank you.
Any other discussion of the board?
I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be better to, I know you only have 63 feet there, but wouldn't it be better to go the whole 100 feet on your property just so nothing does get planted in that area? Even though you can't go past your property, I understand that.
To extend it back to meet the northern tip of the 100-foot, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, just so the owner doesn't plant something there that would block the sight distance.
There's no physical obstruction in it.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, yeah, so you can't go past the property line. That makes sense.
I think,
That's why
there's so many screens in here, I'm not sure which one to point to now. I think if we move it back to this point, Mr. Weaver, and we bring it out,
Right,
it would have to stop at the property line.
right.
They do have a garage that is nearby. The Geist have a garage on their property, which is actually encroaching over the property line, which they've
Right.
also entered into an agreement with. So, I mean, that could be maintained, however, it would have to stop there. The only
Right.
thing that would limit them is obviously planting anything in that area, landscaping or anything, which otherwise we don't have anything proposed in that location, if that's the
Right.
concern.
It'd mainly just be the idea that they can't plant anything in that little trapezoid.
Sure.
So would that be
And
something you'd be amendable? That's a
Sure.
pretty simple change at this point. It's pretty much getting a full sight triangle back in place. You obviously, theoretically, you're not crossing over the property line. You got the safe stopping sight distance working. You got nothing being planted in that triangle. It's a safe driveway.
Sure, and if that's a condition the board would like to apply to the modification, I see no issue with that.
Is the board okay with that change?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Any other discussions of the board about this modification? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve modification number 5 as modified in tonight's discussion for the 791 Stony Barry Road final plan, Township File 20-05-04, subject to staff and engineer comments.
So move.
Okay, motion from Mr. LaFever. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Wigglesworth. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. And thank your client for going above and beyond with that, reaching out to the homeowner and in many ways doing the right thing. And we really do appreciate that. Please pass that on to him.
Absolutely.
And-
Actually, Aaron Rapucci with Catalyst should be on the Zoom call, so hopefully he's hearing that.
It is appreciated, and it shows a good faith effort, and we really do appreciate that. So thank you for taking that, your client for taking that very seriously. So,
Yep, absolutely. We appreciate the discussion and openness.
so next we'll move on to State Road Commerce Park, lots 1 and 3, approval of agreements, financial security, and stormwater management fees. Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Normally, this would be on the consent agenda, but due to the fact that we got these in late last week, I put them on the action items. And basically, solicitor and the township engineer reviewed all the agreements and the financial security, and staff is recommending adoption and approval of the agreements, setting the financial security and the stormwater fees as recommended by the township engineer.
Okay, any discussion of the board? Okay, seeing none, any questions of the audience? I forgot to ask that for the last question. Okay, seeing none. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agreements, financial security and stormwater fees for State Road Commerce Park, revised final plan for lots number 1 and 3, township file number 20-18.03, subject to staff, engineer, and solicitor comments. Do I hear a motion?
Moved.
Motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Weaver. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett? Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next, we move on to Yellow Goose Properties LLC final plan for 3101 Yellow Goose Road. Approval of final plan modifications, agreement, financial security, and stormwater management fees. It looks like we have Mr. Miller here again. And Mr. Beck, if you can start off, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you gentlemen, it's not very often that we get a full land development plan and subordinate or subsequent administrative items before the board for one shot at approval. For you tonight is the final plan for 3101 Yellow Goose Road, which is a proposed development for a Ducklings Daycare Center, along with modifications, the agreements, financial security, and stormwater fees. If you bear with me while I'm pulling up the file. Goodness. The property is approximately 2.9 acres. They are proposing a 10,005 square foot daycare facility. They will be doing improvements, road improvements to Yellow Goose Road, as well as they will be doing landscaping improvements. And in addition, they will be adding an pedestrian access easement to the west of the property. The developer, along with help from their engineer, has adjusted the landscaping so as when the pedestrian access is installed on the property, the landscaping will be will not be impacted as much as possible. Shown on the screen, you will see to the west of the property is the 20-foot pedestrian access easement. With regards to the items that are presented to the board, they have been reviewed by the township engineer, township solicitor, and township staff. Township staff supports the recommendation to approve the final plan, to approve the modifications as recommended by the township engineer, and to approve the agreements, establish the financial security, and establish the stormwater fees as recommended by the township engineer. Mr. Miller, I believe, is here to answer any further questions the board may have about this project.
Thank you for the introduction, John. I don't have anything additional to add to the introduction. He hit the main points, which were the workings that we've had with township staff to ensure the developer has given some land there to ensure an easement for future for connection to the park should it be necessary, or the trail network that the township's working on, as well as a part of our deferrals, as you'll see in the request this evening, is for the sidewalks along the frontage of the property to be installed when comprehensive trail network is developed as well. So essentially, this is the same plan that we had before you in sketch plan phase. We have worked through all the engineering comments, and right now we just have administrative items left to address in DMA's letter dated March 30th. So with that, I'm happy to walk through the modifications and deferrals if you like. They are all standard ones that seem to come with almost any project, but I'd happy to entertain any questions and talk through them if you wish.
I'll start off. I do appreciate the developer taking into account our desires about the trail network and putting those items in there. That was good discussion. I also do appreciate the improvements that are being proposed with putting a turn lane in, like, is kind of unusual, but it's actually a really good fit, all things considered, with that intersection the way it is, which gives both the owner across the street as well as the daycare facility a good and safe way for people to make turns into their driveways. So it's actually a really unique layout for a rather difficult situation at that location. So I just wanted to commend the team and the planning commission and our staff and yourself with just coming up with something that really seems to work well for that one unique situation. So thank you.
You're welcome. And Eric Scott is on with Yellow Goose Properties and Oak Tree as well. And Claudia with McNeese and Craig with TPD, if anyone has any other questions for them. They've also, I know that we mentioned this at sketch plan too, I've been working with the Yoders, which are on the south side of Yellow Goose Road, to help rectify their parking and entrance situation as well. So Mike O'Brien's been working with them actively to help address their concerns.
This is a very creative solution to what was a very difficult problem at that location. So well done. Anything else from the board? Any questions, comments?
Just a quick question on the packet. Is the traffic impact study contained in the documents here?
It is not.
But
There was a traffic impact study.
right.
It was thoroughly reviewed, and I provided the last review letter from McMahon that showed that they had no additional technical comments.
Okay, but it's not, okay. And I've got no problem with the plan. They referenced the traffic impact study in the documentation, and I didn't see it there. That was my only issue.
Okay, any other comments of the board at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I just echo what you said and appreciate the applicant working with the township, and hopefully someday soon we'll get that walking path.
It is a very creative solution. I know there's a lot of back and forth as to how to address that intersection, and what I see for the final product, I'm actually very pleased with my traffic background. I think that's very creative. I like giving kudos when I actually see good road work. So thank you. Anything else of the board? Okay. Well, it's a one and done vote, so I entertain a motion and I will read it. It's just the way plans should be prepared. So the motions are, first we'll do modifications. Motion to approve modification request number 3, number 6, and number 7, and conditionally approve modification request number 1, 2, 4, 5 for the 3101 Yellow Goose Road Final Land Development Plan, Township File 2012.02, subject to staff and engineer comments. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. LaFever. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next, we'll move on to the agreements and financial security. Motion to approve the agreements, the financial security and stormwater management fees for the 3101 Yellow Goose Road Final Plan, Township File number 2012.02, subject to staff, engineer, and solicitor comments. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Weaver. Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. LaFever. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next up is the final plan approval. Motion to approve the 3101 Yellow Goose Road Final plan, Township File Number 20-12-02, conditioned upon resolution of all outstanding staff and engineering comments within 90 days of plan approval, unless extended by the board for cause shown, or plan approval will be null and void. Do I hear a motion? Okay, motion from Mr. LaFever. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Bennett. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. It's very rare that we have everything at one time. So pass that on to your clients that was very good. Good work.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next up, we have the sign ordinance amendment authorization to submit for planning review and advertisement for adoption. Normally, we would pass this on to the planning commission, but I do think there needs to be a little bit of an explanation as to why we're at this point. So Mr. Beck or Ms. Schweitzer, if you could kind of explain why we're doing a text amendment for one word in an ordinance.
Go ahead, John.
There was a recent zoning hearing board case that highlighted an issue that has been occurring for quite some time now. And I know the board has, and the planning commission have made comments that we need to take a comprehensive approach to our sign ordinance and to update it from a comprehensive standpoint. However, in addressing this issue, which can be done with a minor text amendment, and what I'm talking about is in our commercial zones, our enterprise zone, our campus zone, simply allowing 2 building signs per tenant. We can get this accomplished and still have time to go through with our comprehensive sign ordinance update. However, the comprehensive sign ordinance update could take some time. We can get this minor amendment through and address some of the issues that we've seen pop up over the last couple of years. So as I said, it's for business identification signs in the enterprise, the regional commerce center zone, the community business center zone, the campus zone, mineral extraction zone, and I believe that's it.
And just to add on to that, it's not increasing the square footage, not increasing anything else. And to put it in very practical perspective, the zoning hearing board case was the Mercedes dealer, and it was his sign, and then the little Mercedes emblem that has to be on the corner of the building, which is both under the total signage square footage requirement. That little emblem was not permitted.
Correct. Yes, right now, a maximum permitted sign area would be 200 square feet. That would remain regardless of the number of signs. This just allows flexibility for businesses throughout the township in those zones to have 2 signs and 2 building signs instead of 1.
Okay, so I just wanted to just kind of get that. I know we are working on a comprehensive zoning solution, but for a one-word text amendment, and given that this dealer has been very good to our police department, and not saying that's the reason we do that, but it's a local business and it's a very minor issue. And so the thought was to not make that business owner wait months while we do the comprehensive thing for a one-word fix. So that's really the idea of bringing this forward. I know there was a lot of frustration that came out of that zoning hearing board meeting over something that kind of seems common sense in a way. And I know a couple of you sat in on that zoning hearing board meeting and got to see what was going on. But I thought, given that we have the big picture sign ordinance going on, that's why I thought we need to have an explanation as to why we're taking up a one-word change at this point. So,
Having attended that zoning hearing board meeting, I completely agree with what we're trying to do here. My question is, why don't we just change it? Why does it have to go back to planning? Why does it have to go to Lancaster?
that's required by law. Anytime we make a ordinance change, we have to run it through those 2 groups. I would love to just make a change, but anytime we make a change to zoning, we have to run it past everybody.
Enough said.
Any other discussions of the board at this point? Is basically just to pass it on to the 2 planning commissions for review.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything from the audience at this point? Okay, seeing none. So the motion is to authorize staff to submit the signed ordinance amendment to the Lancaster County Planning Commission and East Hempfield Township Planning Commission for review and recommendation, and to authorize staff to advertise a signed ordinance amendment for adoption. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Bennett. Do I hear a second? A second from the chair. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Abstain.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it with 4 with 1 abstention. Okay, next up, we have the Four Seasons Golf HVAC unit replacement request for Liebold Incorporated for a change order to the contract extending the completion date to June 18th, 2021 due to delays in delivery of the HVAC units. Ms. Switzer, would you start this discussion off?
So we are working through the process of getting the HVAC units replaced on the rooftops of Four Seasons. There are 7 units. The order's been placed, but the delivery has been delayed because of everything's delayed. And the contractor has asked for an extension of time off of his contract. We had a very tight contract, a very tight turnaround in the hopes that we could get this accomplished. But this is beyond his control. It's a condition of train and getting the units out of their door. So I'm asking for the extension to June 18th.
Okay, and we have informed our restaurant of the issues too?
Yes, we have met with them. We are working with them and getting them what they need, and they're getting us what we need.
Okay,
to
so
keep moving.
basically they're accepting, I mean,
Yes.
I think I got no choice. I understand. I know supply delays in what I do for a living, so I understand that, so.
The current units that are above the roof on the window room do function. So if worse comes to worse, we could connect them temporarily and continue to have them air conditioning and heating if they need it. But given the season, we might be okay. And the schedule is very tight that they just might overlap and everything will be fine. But we have contingency.
Mr. Bennett, do you have anything to add to, or?
Well, just as Mrs. Schweitzer said, it's contingent. Hopefully, we won't need all of that time period.
Right.
We're still hopeful that we're going to be up and running mid-May. But just to be on the safe side, I think this is appropriate. This action is appropriate at this time.
Okay. Any more discussion of the board? Okay, anybody from the audience? Seeing none? The motion is for the Four Seasons Golf Course HVAC. The motion is to extend the Liebold Incorporated contract to June 18th, 2021 due to delays to the HVAC units delivery. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. LaFever. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Bennett. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next up, we have Church Street PennDOT resurfacing project, provide an offer to purchase additional right-of-way for improvements to the existing culvert near the golf course and Hark. Offer is $15,000. It's resolution 2021-18. Ms. Switzer, if you can start the discussion.
So PennDOT is planning on resurfacing Church Street. And in order to do that, they are making some modifications to the culvert on that track, on that roadway, as well as the curve. And what you see on the screen is the area that they need additional right-of-way around the culvert. The yellow part is temporary construction, and the very red strip parts are permanent right-of-way. PennDOT has gone out and done a survey and analysis, and they are offering $15,000 in damages. Direct damages of $4,400. Temporary easement of $600, and the cost of adjustment, $10,000. I've checked with the solicitor. She's recommended that a resolution be adopted, and she has provided that to us.
Okay. From it, not necessarily related to this, but related to that issue, given that both upstream and downstream floods, I'm assuming PennDOT's working on trying to maintain an equivalent pipe size with whatever they're doing, so they're not increasing or decreasing flooding, both either upstream or downstream, but basically leaving the status quo the way it is.
We have had discussions with PennDOT regarding that. Mr. Hain, could you maybe, do you remember those discussions, or Perry? I know we discussed it with the project manager from PennDOT.
Our concern is not to upsize the pipe and further exacerbate the flooding in Mill Creek.
Right,
So-
right. And we had that discussion with them. Scott, I don't know if you remember that, if you were
I
part
do
of that.
remember the discussion. I know that I know the pipe's not getting any smaller. I thought that it was staying the same, but I would, it's been, I apologize. It's been too long since we talked about this at this point. I can go back and get that answer for you though, Mr. Russell, and
Yeah,
confirm.
I think this would be a good use of your engineering time to just
Okay.
verify slopes and pipe sizes and everything's equivalent. And basically after the pipe is done, there will still be both upstream and downstream flooding, and we won't move the upstream flooding further exacerbating the downstream flooding. And we obviously have some long-term plans to address the upstream flooding that will improve the overall situation, but upsizing the pipe is not a good solution at this point.
Yeah, and I know we looked at it and discussed it, so
Yeah.
we'll
I know,
confirm.
I'm just bringing that up.
Yep.
We just don't want to have a project and all of a sudden now we have another tropical storm Lee-like event, and instead of having 10 or 15 homes in Snapper Dam with flooded basements, we have a whole street with flooded basements now,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I'll check into that and I'll get you an answer quickly on that.
I mean, if you prefer, we can also hold this till a future meeting as well.
Well, I don't think that they're going to move forward with the project. I think we can interject by saying, hey, if there's a hypothetical, there's a 24-inch pipe and they're now throwing a 30-inch pipe, I think I have full confidence that David Miller can correspond with PennDOT and we can get that fixed at this point. I'm just putting that on the radar screen.
Does it matter? Will it slow anything down if we wait to the next meeting?
I usually don't like to slow right away down because that slows the whole project down at this point. I trust that this project is not that far along that we, yeah, I know it has been raised with PennDOT. All I'm asking for is a confirmation at this point. So I feel pretty confident that we can address both these issues in parallel. Anything else for the board on this one?
Does this, the only other question I'd have is, does this affect Park at all?
It does not. They had planted trees out there, and early on, right after they planted them, they realized that there was going to be some taking, and they moved the trees back, so they were not affected. There is a strip of land that's being taken from the Hark property, yes.
And do they know that?
Yes, because we had talked to them about the trees.
And hopefully this, with all the riprap, both upstream and downstream, should slow the flow right around the culvert too, which should help further reduce some of the erosion that's been occurring too. Plus, we already had our project that we did south of the culvert. Any other discussions of the board? Okay, so the motion is to provide an offer to purchase additional right-of-way for improvements to the existing culvert near the golf course and Hempfield Area Recreation Commission. Offer is $15,000 and it's resolution 2021-18. So motion to approve resolution 2021-18.
So moved.
Okay, a motion from Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second? Second from the chair. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever? Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next up, we have the DCNR grant submission for Phase 2 Aher Park Resolution 2021-19, authorization to submit the grant. Ms. Switzer?
So we had a discussion at the last meeting regarding the scope of the grant process. The grant needs to be submitted by April 14th. This is for Phase 2 of the Aher Park project. You'll see on the picture on the screen, if you start from the left side, left side, you'll see that there's a parking lot and a driveway being installed. There is a trail system and handicapped walkway to the existing pavilion. Moving across, we're also adding 2 additional bocce courts to the 2 that are already there. And accompanying stormwater facilities are also being added there. If you move to the other side of the park, near the Gaga Pit and on the other side of the Aher Park, or Dream Park, we are proposing a second pavilion and accompanying stormwater facilities. This all comes to an estimate of $380,770. The DCNR grant is a 50-50 match. And this is the second time we have submitted it. The DMA, Joellen Warren, is suggesting that to strengthen our proposal is to go with a 40-60 match, meaning the township would put in $228,000 and the grant would be for $152,000. Or we could go for 50-50, which would be $190 for each of us in round numbers. Now, the grant, once awarded would span 3 years. So we could proportion it out if we went with either amount, but with the higher amount, that would be about $76K per year. But we'd have to adjust that to make it work with the project. So we would build the pavilion or we put the driveway in. So we might be spending more or less in any given year.
Where are we at with our dedication funds right now for Park and Rec?
They are pretty much non-existent. I think they're about, that's a tough question. I want to say 30,000. John, have you looked at that lately? There has not been much added to it. So I would say it's around 30 or 40,000.
We haven't had much residential development lately, so.
No.
Do we know with the, it's not chartered, with the development at Stony Battery and Marietta?
They
Are
would
they
be,
contributing a fee for that,
yes.
or are they
No?
dedicating facilities?
No, they're dedicating land.
Okay. Do we need the land at this point at that location?
At the time, we thought we would need it for any right-of-way improvements and possible stormwater stream bank restorations along.
We're
with-
talking about that farm, that little orphan farmland. They're counting that as open
Yes.
recreation land.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that was the recreation land exchange, but
And there's no other open recreation that they're proposing, and that orphan land that they were offering to the township meets all the requirements of Park and Rec.
As far as I remember, yes.
Okay. So we really don't have anything coming in on dedication fund at this point. There's no real, any housing development plan in the docket right now. Okay. So what's the thoughts of our Park and Rec group?
Well, on the resubmission, I'd like to go with the 40-60 split. I think that makes sense. I think we've got a good shot at receiving the grant. And I think that the new split makes it more likely that we would receive it. So, I'm for it. As we get down the road, I think we can find the money to subsidize the a little bit of increased spending that we're going to have to make on this project. So I think it's a great plan. And I think we'll see a good outcome.
Mr. Weaver?
Well, I kind of hate to leave money on the table, but our expert, Joe Ellen, has I have no experience with this stuff, so I would tend to take her recommendation.
So basically, you both are recommending the 40-60 split at this point, so.
Yes.
Okay, any more discussion of the board at this point? I will point out the one thing from a budget perspective, we have not had a finance admin meeting lately, but we do have $2.4 million worth of infrastructure money coming to the township to be spent over the next 3 years. I'm not saying that all should go to parks. I think a big chunk of it should go to our Centerville and our roadway projects. But back to your point, we do have some budget flexibility to work with, and the requirements are it has to go to infrastructure. So we are actually going to be flush with some infrastructure money coming up with, which is going to make our budgeting easier for the next couple of years. since we were doing a very heavy number of infrastructure projects. So we have a lot of projects on the books, especially on transportation. But I'm sure we could actually accommodate an additional 10% split very easily at this point. So,
And our federal partners seem to be redefining the term infrastructure, so we probably have a lot more places to spend it in the future.
right. Yeah, that's true. Although I think we have a pretty good infrastructure list. I think we can really stay
we've
true,
got
we
a-
can stay true to the intent, which is
we-
actually put
we-
the public projects.
We have a great focus on,
Yep.
on infrastructure.
So, but back to your original point, I think we need to look at it from a finance and admin perspective with those new monies thrown in, look at our project list as well as for public works. But I feel pretty confident that unless the state completely changes the rules, which is always a possibility, they can make things a lot more difficult. We were going to be seeing a significant amount of money for infrastructure projects.
Is there a document or some guidelines available as to what they are considering infrastructure and what they're considering?
The guidelines are going to come out in about 7 days, because I've been talking to PSATs about that. And that's the federal guidelines. Once the federal guidelines come out, then the state has to put their guidelines together. So right now, all we have is the concept. The concept is we have to 2024 to spend it. It needs to go to infrastructure. It cannot be used for a tax cut, and it cannot go to pension. Those are the two biggest strings that I'm aware of, Ms. Switzer. I don't know if you can
I would agree.
say anything else, but those are the ones I remember recalling when I saw the emails going out with the initial announcement. My understanding is it's probably going to not have the typical federal restrictions, because the CARES Act monies that we got in the past did not have many in the way of restrictions. So we'll see what restrictions the state puts on it, but I think on the federal side, it's going to come with very little restrictions.
So if
So,
we're able to use it for some of the road work and transportation concerns we have in the township, I think that should be considered primary.
Mhm.
I'd like us also to think about what we might do at Four Seasons to develop more community recreation facilities there. I think there's a lot of potential there. It's going to be interesting to see how the blue collar effort goes forward. I understand the golf year is coming on well already. I think there's a lot of potential at that corner. And if we could have some seed money from this, I'd like to see that.
you said on public works, so we'll have an opportunity to talk about the money. So, any other discussions on this grant application at this point? Okay, seeing none. Anything from the audience? Seeing none. So the motion is to adopt resolution 2021-19 as modified and discussed tonight with the 40-60 split, authorizing the manager to sign a DCNR grant application and submit the grant application on behalf of East Hempfield Township. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Bennett. Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Weaver. Ms. Switzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth, Mr. LaFever, Mr. Russell.
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the employee manual update to add remote work policy, a new trend in our, as we start coming out of COVID and have found that remote work does actually work at times. So, Ms. Switzer.
So you adopted the updated policy in February, which was overdue. It was the update from 2014. Of course, we've had some small ones in between. But the remote work policy was developed between February and now. And what I'd like to do before I present it to the employees is to also add the remote work policy. The remote work policy is limited to 1 or 2 days per week. It is fully customized. It is specific to an employee. It does not apply to all, and it can be stopped at any time. So we're going to venture into this type of thing. It's like Mr. Russell said, the trend. We need to stay up on the trend to keep employees interested in working for the township.
I mean, I will just be honest, I would be a hypocrite if I didn't say I'm also going to be doing a hybrid going forward with my workload. My drives to Camp Hill, my Camp Hill office are going to probably be just 2 days a week right now. other 3 days a week, I'm going to be working remote because I have no issue being able to do it. And most of my work's in Lancaster County anyway, so it doesn't make sense to drive to Camp Hill to only work with Lancaster clients. So we talked about this for public admin. I don't know, Mr. Bennett, if you have anything to add to.
No, again, I think it's a good plan. I believe that the addition of the form now puts sufficient and appropriate guardrails in place for administering the policy. So I like it.
Now, is this something we actually have to take action on to add, or or is this just acknowledgement of it? What's the,
We had our labor attorney look at it. She would like it part of the policy.
Okay.
So it would be an amendment to the personnel policy.
any more discussion on the board at this point? It is very much, the onus falls on the manager to manage it. It's not a benefit or a right at this point. It's a earned, and it has to demonstrate that it's as valuable to the township as it is to the employee.
Correct.
So it does increase the stress of our township manager to manage the program and the immediate reporting managers that report to the manager. But I think as long as there's not abuses, it could be a valuable tool for a happy workforce and a very productive workforce. So anything from the audience? Okay, seeing none. The motion is to update the employee manual to add the remote work policy. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Bennett. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, well, let me get the motion then, and second by the chair. Okay, if you could state your name, please, sir. My name is Joe Long. You got to come up here because of the people on Zoom, so.
I just happened to hear what the lady was saying about the remote work thing. I'm not here for any specific reason. I think she said it was going to be done on an individual basis.
That's correct.
Right.
Should it be equal treatment for all?
You can't do that with public works. You can't do that with police officers. They can't work remotely from their house, and when their jobs require them to be physically present every day. So that's why it's left up to the manager's discretion.
Okay.
So we have a number of jobs where you have to be physically present. A receptionist that's greeting people at the door can't do that remotely from their house. So you have to be able, it has to be the type of work that can be done remotely. And a lot of our work can't be done remotely as a township.
All right.
So-
I just had a question about equal treatment.
Yeah, it's going to be a very fair policy, but just certain number of our jobs. I mean, our police officers signed up knowing that their job is to hop in a car and patrol the neighborhood. So that's part of the job description. So not every job description translates well to this policy, but the ones that do, we're offering the flexibility.
Never mind.
That's okay. That's a good question. We do try to treat all of our employees the same. So we try to be fair.
I called Mr. Lefevre a couple weeks ago after I saw his picture in the paper with people from the fire companies. And I called him for two reasons. One was I said, look, Ed, I'm going to keep this picture and I'd like to have your autograph on it. And the second one was, if you're getting a lot of money from the government that wasn't expected, the fire companies are always singing the blues about not having enough money for years and years and years, and you've held the line well. I said, could some of that money be put into an account and just the interest from it go to the fire companies? Not that there's much interest anymore,
Right.
but that changes from year to year.
We
I know this is a completely different subject, and if you want me to wait till the
No,
comment section.
we're almost done our action items. I don't mind getting
There
one
was-
issue for,
There was a third thing which reverts back to what the lady said earlier, equal treatment. I said, with all the things that have happened in the past 13 months, Doug Mastriano, which I believe is from the western part of the state, the representative, and I had a chuckle when this fellow was being sworn in. He said a lot of people raised their hand and take the oath to the Constitution of the United States and Pennsylvania, they don't know what the oath is. That's why I've raised the question about equal treatment. I have paid attention to the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, for years and years, and it's been violated, especially by the governor 13 months ago.
Acknowledged.
And, I don't think anybody very few people know what they're swearing an oath to. The young fella here, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. They were the three things that I brought up with Mr. LaFever.
Okay.
Does the township do a test against the Bill of Rights before they pass any ordinances or laws?
We are very much followers of the law. I mean, and so when we adopt ordinances and we go through the ordinance process, we are looking to see that we are complying with both state and federal law every time we adopt an ordinance. There have been over the last couple of years in particular, moves by residents who are frustrated with our state and laws to try and get the township to adopt ordinances and rules that are in violation of federal laws, state laws, federal constitution, state constitution. We have resisted that every single time. So to answer your question, we're very cognizant of what the laws are. We don't like all the laws. We don't like all the rules. But we don't break the rules in this township. If I can go through a laundry list of rules right now that we do not like, that are basically unfunded mandates, other things that we're required to follow, that I feel are just wrong, including ones that I feel violate the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as you talk about, but it's a federal law. They just are not following the Constitution as far as I'm concerned.
So the feds aren't following it.
Right, but
You have to.
we have to
Or
follow
you
it.
don't get the money.
I could spend all night talking about this. This is something I'm very
Yeah, I
passionate
didn't mean
about.
to get into all this
But
stuff.
what happens at the local government is we have one hand tied behind our back. And we're the one group that has to be completely transparent. That's why a lot of our meetings sometimes seem a little rough, because we don't go behind doors and knock out how we're going to vote on everything and come out to the meeting and hammer out a meeting in 20 minutes and leave. That's why our meetings run long, because we're deliberating in public in front of people. You don't do that at the state and federal level. A lot of stuff is done behind closed doors. That doesn't occur at the local level. We are only given powers expressly in the Pennsylvania Constitution, so we can't just go arbitrarily legislate. Some entities, some of the cities do that. They'll make up laws and stuff like that, but constitutionally, we're only allowed to implement ordinances based off of the powers that have been granted to us. And that's something we do take very seriously. We are not going to overstreet, we're not going to overreach, we're not going to violate federal or state law. So our powers are limited to what we can and cannot regulate and what we can or cannot do. And we would strive to stay within those guidelines that have been given to us.
This one other item, the infrastructure money. Must you use union shops or pay prevailing wage?
We will be paying prevailing wage. That's a law we cannot get around.
PA's been trying to, everybody promises
Right.
get rid of prevailing wage in the state stores and the school property tax for years.
Again, that's another one of those things that gets dictated to us from the state. We're not allowed to bid any projects that have federal or state funds without prevailing wage or David Bacon rate if it's federal, which it could be David Bacon rate, given what this federal sources, which is even worse than Pennsylvania prevailing wage. But that's, again, following law. I don't like that. I don't think it's fair. I don't think the public advertising process is fair. We basically subsidize the newspapers now with our advertisement fees, when most everybody else, including the state and the feds, do everything online. But at local government, we're still required to post an advertisement on papers for everything that we do, even though most of the residents do not read the newspaper anymore, and they get their information online. So again, there's things that our hands are tied. So basically, we prop up the newspapers in this state with our advertisement fees.
Thank you for addressing my few concerns.
No, thank you. Okay, so we will move back. We have a motion and a second. I will reread the motion. The motion is to update the employee manual to add the remote work policy as discussed. The motion was from Mr. Bennett. The second was from the chair. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Okay, we have no old business and new business. We have a request that had come from Manheim Township related to a resolution to the county commissioners for a county health department. Any discussion of the board about this matter?
So obviously, everybody got a copy of the resolution in their packet. And I think this has the potential to be a controversial topic. And with that being said, I'd rather that we don't make a knee-jerk reaction on it tonight. I think we have an excellent opportunity for a case study on how health departments actually did county to county, something that we can compare how Lancaster County did with how other counties that maybe have a health department did, and take a look at that before we get into the resolution. And I would just ask that we refer this to the Public Safety Committee, have us with staff take a hard look at it. You know, there could be potential for something that I could totally be for this. For example, you know, if we were to adopt a health department and the state would be required to relinquish their control over that, and it would be governed by local government, which I think governs better, because just as we had this discussion here, it's closer to the people, and we can have residents who are unhappy, we would have to face them. Whereas a heavy-handed state-run organization, we're the ones that had to deal with all the outcry, really, and the people's frustration over COVID, and we had nothing to do with any of the mandates. So, you know, if it were something along those lines, or could be crafted in something along those lines, you know, that might, I think, bring a lot of people on board for a health department. But there are other questions too. You know, what is the scope of the health department? Where does it start? Where does it stop? What areas do they have control over? So I think there's a lot more to it than just, do we want a health department or do we not want a health department?
So anyone tell me what this department would do that the hospitals don't already do?
I think with you two both serving on public safety, you could probably find out those answers. I don't think anybody knows those answers to those questions right now.
Yeah, it's a solution looking for a problem. It's a problem looking for, no, it's whatever.
I have no, this is a new business item. It's not something we take action on anyways. I think it would be wise counsel to delve into it. And there's too many fire from the hip decisions anymore occurring where people pass a bill and then afterwards they read what they're actually passing. And, you know, I think some deliberate thought as to what we're doing is very important. So it's not action we need to take. There's no vote on this tonight. If public safety feels up to that task, I think that'd be a great role for our busiest committee to get even busier at this point. It's not like you guys don't have anything else to do, right?
Well, we got the fire commission all taken care of.
You got fire departments fixed. We got no problems. That EMS is now taken over by Penn State. You got all this, you got everything, everything's good, right? I think maybe, so we'll do that unless there's any objections, and I'm not seeing anybody. I do want to just reiterate East Hempfield Township's policy. We've never put this into writing, but I do want to emphasize this again. East Hempfield Township's policy has always been that we do not engage in partisan politics. We do not in any way get ourselves involved in state and federal issues unless they directly impact our running of this township. And we've done a very good job of that over the years. There was some bills I didn't like the gambling stuff that was occurring at the state level, when those discussions were occurring, or the legalization of medicinal marijuana. But we stayed out of those things. And it's a very slippery slope when we start now taking our energies and focusing on county, state, and federal issues and take our eye off of local government issues, which is what we're really charged to do. So up to this point, we've done a very good job of keeping those issues out of the township and not allowing them to distract us from what our day-to-day operations are. And I'd just like to remind everybody of how we've handled requests in the past, whether it was gambling, redistricting, or some of the other things that have come into this township, and where we have basically stayed above board and not delved into partisan politics. So with that, any discussions at this point? Okay, seeing none. We will now move into the manager's report. Ms. Schweitzer.
So you received a copy of my report, and just a few of the highlights. Centerville Road, Church Street paving, and Old Rowerstown Road Bridge are still kind of moving along forward, not rapidly, but they're moving forward. Farmingdale Road, the long-term project there, we have a little bit of a snafu in addition to the HOP project, HOP issuance, and some utility coordination. We also have a right-of-way issue, which we're attempting to work through. We're going to reach out to the parties involved and bring them in for a meeting and have a discussion with them, see if we can get it resolved. But until those things are all settled, we can't move forward. So their timeline for the end of March, of course, was not met. We are hoping to keep that moving forward and get everything issued and in place as quickly as we can. But it is on a slower track than we would like. The state road projects, the PennDOT project for the interchange, we had a meeting this morning. They anticipate pouring the decks of the bridges probably April and May. So that project is moving forward, but they hope to have that completed by probably mid-August. So that's good news. Commerce Park is the section in between at the intersection of Yellow Goose and State Road. That's moving along as well. They have some utility coordination to do. And then we have the part that's closed in terms of the Penn State project and the Brookside project on the other side of the street. The base has been laid as they promised, and they are positioning themselves to be on the agenda for April 21st, which is our next meeting, for dedication of State Road and reopen it the following morning. Staff has talked to the O'Brien Group, and we feel that we're probably going to ask the Traffic Commission to reduce the speed on that roadway during right after it opens until at least it gets the base on because of the construction zone as well as the newness of the road. Plus there will be a police presence out there when it does open to kind of control things. Four Seasons, Blue Collar, the HVAC we talked about. We have been in contact with Blue Collar. The snack bar is open and in operation. They opened Monday. They are selling liquor through our liquor license at the township, the Four Seasons license. We are still waiting for that to get transferred to them and working through that process with our attorney that handles those things. We talked about the American Rescue Plan funding as the requirements are coming down. And we're taking a wait and see approach to see what other municipalities are doing, what the state's doing, what the county's doing. And then Joe and I will be meeting with the admin finance and laying out what we can and can't do in terms of at least the first funding amount, which is supposed to be due in June.
Now you had put on there or roads and bridges for it cannot be used for.
At the last one that I attended was roads and bridges. They could not be used for that. But since they're redefining the definition of infrastructure, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, roads and bridges are infrastructure. That's your most basic infrastructure.
They are, but you can use it for water and sewer. But roads and bridges, I was told there is a separate funding source for roads and bridges, which is not part of the allocation back to the municipality.
Okay.
Now, that could have changed.
Yeah, because
It's changing.
I'm not saying I disagree. I just didn't see the roads and bridges part. So
Yeah, I
that's-
pulled that off of the PSAT's town meeting that they had. They included roads and bridges on that list because there was a separate funding source is what they said.
I'm assuming stormwater would qualify.
It says water and sewer, and the interpretation right now is that includes stormwater, yes.
And I would assume that would also include our debt service on our police building with our pivot line too. Because that was a infrastructure project.
And again, I haven't seen the definition of infrastructure that they're using.
Yeah.
Um,
The problem with the other funding sources is it's going to PennDOT and it's going to be used by PennDOT. The townships are not going to see any money for roads and bridges
Right.
from the funding that goes to the state level for that. That is going to fill PennDOT's hole right now that they have for transportation funding. So there is absolutely going to be $0 coming from PennDOT, who's got the roadway allocations to the municipalities. So it sounds like we're going to have to do some politicking if there's the roads and bridges part's going to stay in there.
Yeah.
Okay. That
I
will
mean,
be
it's evolving and changing, and we're watching it, so.
Yeah, that will definitely be a PSATS discussion. Okay.
Yeah, that was part of the PSATS town hall. We are moving through the process for the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and the Four Seasons permit for withdrawing water at that facility. That's moving along. The Aher Trails were,
Unconstitutional, but
sorry?
continue. I said, speaking of unconstitutional, but continue.
Yeah, exactly. The Aher Trails were completing the paving that was started, I believe, today, and we're working on finishing that up. The, let's see. I did submit a job offer to replace the senior bookkeeper who retired after 38 years. The new person is scheduled to start on April 26th. We also retitled that position to staff accountant and now require a bachelor's degree in accounting. So we're anxious to get her in, and we will have her come to a meeting and introduce her. Group reports, Stormwater MS4 met. You have the highlights at that one. Public safety just met on Monday. Received updates on the employee vaccine across the police and the admin side. Got an update from Chief Skiles regarding the body worn cameras, and we're kind of on hold until the grant notice comes out, which could be in a couple of days. He's hoping by the end of April. John Kottmeyer did, our new chief fire official, did give a report. He's been attending fire company meetings and participating in their training. He also is working on a 35-year replacement schedule. It's in draft form at this point. He's attempting to get buy-in and changes from the departments, and then we'll be presenting it to the commission at some point in the future. And his next look will be at recruitment and retention. There's also discussion about specific goals for East Hempfield Township in terms of the fire departments. And I've unfortunately stepped out of that meeting, so I'm not sure if anything else was discussed. But that's pretty much the essence of that.
I think you got the fire department stuff down. I'd just like to say that I'm very impressed so far with Mr. Copmore, and I believe we definitely hired the right person. This is going to be a difficult job to get these items accomplished, but I like what I've seen and what I've heard, and I think his philosophy really matches our board. I wanted to pass that along. Regarding public safety, during that meeting, there were two items regarding the police that were brought up that I think we should talk about tonight. One specifically was the fencing. It's an issue that we had spoken about before. I think we put that on hold and tried to see how things would play out with signs and posting signs, and see if we could control the foot traffic behind the building and that sort of thing with the signage, and that has not been as successful. And Chief is here. Maybe he could speak to that a little bit. And then the second thing that maybe he could talk about or address to the board is the grant. He was supposed to have an answer on that grant quite a while ago. We're hoping to get it soon, but it just seems to be dragging out. So there may be a decision, do we continue to wait or do we move forward with the body camera purchase without the grant? So that's not a decision we need to make tonight, but it's food for thought.
My statement in the meeting was that if we had one incident where the absence of this camera resulted in significant problems for the officer and for the township, it would be a no-brainer. And I suggested we make a deadline date of April 30th. If we haven't gotten the grant, we go ahead.
So what's this update on the grants right now, Chief?
Well, we had applied for two grants, the PCCD, which was federal money, passed through to the state. We didn't get that grant. And then the second one was the DCED. That's a state grant and it's regional based. There's 5 police departments that all submitted for the same thing. Our grant writer told us that we were going to get word on that grant in December. I've called and emailed numerous times, and every time that I contact them, they tell me that it's under review. Most recently, last week, I reached out to Brett Miller. He contacted the office on my behalf, and they told him that it's under review and that we should know by next week. So my position at this point is we're already 3 months behind in our deployment of these cameras. There's a 4 to 6 week turnaround from the time we order them till the time we get them, and then we need to put them out, do a pilot program. Our intention was to have them on the street by April. If I ordered them today, they're not going to be on the street until probably July. So the longer that we put it off, it goes by. If you remember, you budgeted, I think it was right around $25,000 a year for 5 years. So we have the funding. The problem with buying anything now is the grant's not reimbursable. So if you tell me to go buy them today, and next week we get the grant for 60 grand, and I just lost 60 grand. So, but there has to be an end date at some point. So that's really what I want to ask you.
So if, just a matter of timing, do we got to pay up front at this point or pay on receipt? Or
It's 25. Actually, they told me that if budgeting was a problem, WatchGuard company said that they could defer the first year. So I could order them today and not have to pay for a year.
so if we didn't make our first payment to 1 year, will we still qualify for the grant?
Probably not.
And now, because the purchase date would be before the grant comes out. So that's why it's kind of a gamble. I kept putting it off, and now we're into 4 months after I was told we were going to know.
How much is that grant covering the full amount? And obviously, it's not.
It depends. Depends on how much they give us totally. So, because we went in with 5 police departments, they could reimburse up to 50% of the total package for us, or they could reimburse less than that. So I really don't know.
There's another consideration I've experienced and we've experienced at Blue Collar with the supply chain on things today. We could give you the go-ahead and you could order them and they're not going to be available because they aren't made yet.
I reached out to the company on Friday and they told me 4 to 6 weeks, maybe sooner, but that's the lead time. As you know, everybody's buying body cameras this year and WatchGuard and
Yeah,
Axon.
that's another concern.
Primary companies. So
Well, how flexible are they? If we order and we get the grant after we order, would they allow us to cancel the order and reorder? Basically, it's just a little paper drill, but all we're doing is we're resetting the date, the clock at that point with them.
I don't
I
think we
think
can do that.
I'm comfortable with what Mr. Lefevre said was at the end of the month. If
You
at
got
the end of
5
the month
other
we still don't have an
companies.
answer, I can place that order and cancel that order or do whatever I need to do. But I don't want to spend taxpayer dollars and then lose that amount of money. But at some point in time, I would like to draw the line and say enough's enough.
Right. If we had the flexibility to possibly cancel the order and reorder to reset the clock, if we were to get the grant, then I don't see why we don't order sooner rather than later at this point.
Well, there's other departments, I think, that are involved with the grant. So I don't know that if we order, are we going to be able to cancel and redo it?
Will
I
everybody?
think what might happen is if I go ahead and order and it's not reimbursable, I think the other municipalities may get our share, which they may like. But I know 2 of the other 4 are in the same position I am, where the elected officials said, we want you to buy them, we'll, you know, budget the money. So everybody's kind of anxious to get things moving, but I'm very comfortable with saying, you know, wait 3 weeks at this point. We already waited 3 months.
We would know by our next meeting, one way or the other, roughly.
End of April.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is come to the first meeting in April and say, we still didn't get an answer. Can I please order? And then go from there.
May.
That's next month.
Okay.
This is the first meeting in April.
All right.
Nice try.
Speed things along. And did you want me to talk about the fence too?
Just, yeah, if you could,
Well, the signage, we had put up, Cindy, I don't know if you, I think we put 6 no trespassing signs on our side, and there's signs in the back. There's do not enter signs coming into the police station, parking lot in the back, and there's 2 do not enter signs over here, staff only. Cindy looks out the window and sees the same thing I do. People driving past the building, people park in our lot, people walk their dogs. I think what happens is people are just think that the property that this building sits on is an extension of the public park. So what we were hoping was that the fence, it's not going to stop an insurrection, so to speak, but it will provide a delineation as to what is municipal township office versus township park. So that's what we were trying to do with the fencing. It would kind of give you an area, and it would actually, we don't have gates on it, but at the entrance over here and the entrance on the police side, the fencing would come right up to where the cars would go through, and then there would be signs there. So, you know, people, I don't think anybody's going to climb over the fence. They just walk right past the signs. So I think was it 16,000? I think was the.
Are we talking like a chain link fence or something?
No,
I don't want it looking like prison Hempfield or something like that at this
Barbed
point.
wire, Constantine wire at the top. And I think it's a 6-foot
Is it-
ornamental iron fence with a little.
Decorative fence, so
spike on the
it's
top.
tasteful looking. It's not like we're, like I said, we're an
Yeah, the
impound
only
lot.
spot that, and Perry's on, I think the only spot that was chain link was from the impound lot in the back to the pole barn building. Because it's kind of out of the way and nobody sees it. Is that right, Perry?
Yes, we chose where you really couldn't see it back there from the pole barn back to the other chain link fence there. It really didn't seem to matter back there. So, but everything in the front was a decorative fence. And at this point, I do not recall the dollar value, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood, I believe, where the chief was saying.
It's a comparable fence to what they have up at one of the schools at the Hempfield campus has the same kind of fence. It's black. It's nice. I put it in my yard. It's a nice fence.
The east side would have the ornamental fence also,
Everything would, from the gas pumps to the corner of the building.
or ornamental.
And then from
Okay.
the corner of the police building, the new corner, out to the driveway, and then it would run the length of the driveway to the impound lot. That's all the decorative ornamental fence. From the back, in the back part of the lot where the salt sheds are, that's like a chain link. So I think we just wanted to put that back on the radar again.
Just need to see some concepts, some plans where things are going to go.
I think we have.
Yeah, we probably also have to get an updated number.
I mean, we had a
guess
picture of
it's
the
probably
actual
low.
fence, and we had a picture of where it would go along with the quote from before. But
My biggest objection originally was I just didn't want us looking like we're an impound at this point. And so compound, impound, yeah, compound. So, okay.
Hempfield has a fence. They actually have gates on theirs. I don't think that we need them at this point. But most police departments, public buildings at this point are starting to have, even schools have them. Most schools have them to kind of delineate the playground area from the public areas. So I think it's ornamental. I don't think it looks institutional. In fact, it's the same fence that my brother has around his pool. So I think it looks more like a yard fence than a chain link facility. Thank you.
We'll get the material together and put it on the agenda for next meeting.
Anything else for the manager's report?
We didn't decide on the body cameras.
Oh, Chief said he would come back to us at our April meeting with an update. Next meeting.
May.
Or May would be a vote if we don't have something.
I hope by the end of next week, I can tell you that we got it.
All right.
But it sounds like May's are going to be our drop dead to vote on if we don't have it, so.
All right.
Ms. Switzer, anything else?
I did start adding meetings that I attended that were attended by staff and some of the Board of Supervisors. We had a meeting with Lancaster County Transportation Planning to talk about their visioning of 741. So that was done, outlined what was discussed at that. We also had our first Walk Works grant stakeholders meeting. There's another one planned for the middle of April. The COG had their meeting on the 24th at Manham Township. I did relay the information from the Board of Supervisors concerning the future of the COG. They pretty much tabled it until they got feedback from East Petersburg Borough. The insurance renewal, just warning and heads up, the market is hardening. The prices are going up like everything else. They're seeing 10 and 20% increases. They have spoken to travelers, and travelers indicated probably an 8%, and they are trying for a 5%. So that quote should be coming to the board probably in May. Also, we met on Tuesday with the school district staff and from both parties to discuss a resident's concern about walkers going to school and crossing Church Street. There is not a clear economical path to create that walkway across. And we discussed it and looked at the possibilities, and there just isn't one. The school district personnel are going to report back to their building and grounds committee and the resident. And I was charged with responding back to Representative Ahmed's, Senator Ahmed's office. And so we can probably close that issue. It wasn't our issue, it was the school district that reached out to us and we had the meeting.
Yeah, there's no place you could put a crosswalk there.
No, there isn't. We just had to have the meeting to point that out. And that's the end of my report.
Okay, so we had manager's report, we had the report out. Public comment. Any public comment at this point? Chief, public comment.
This is as a resident, and it's really, I just wanted to bring something to attention, mostly to Mr. Bennett, since you serve on the rec commission. And I know a couple of you guys go to the rec center, but Jeff Book is the, I think his title is the director. I just wanted to point out publicly the kind of work that he does for, like, it's real servant leadership. I've seen him cutting grass today. He was out cutting the front, he was cutting the back, he's mulching, he's cutting leaves, he cleans. So I think that from an economic standpoint, I know that they have some issues now with their staffing and some of their budget, but he's really pitching in to kind of do what he needs to do to keep the place running. And I think that, I don't know how many people in the public realize that he's actually the executive director when he's cutting the grass and trimming bushes, but you don't see that often at a person at that level of an organization. So I don't know how often they have rec meetings, but I would, as a resident and as a member of the gym, I'd like just to pass that on so that you all know what he's doing in the background.
And I will pass that along to the board of the rec at our next meeting. He is a tremendous example, great employee. He sets a tremendous example for all the people that work there. There's no job too small that he won't do. He's done a great job in that respect. He's also done a great job from a financial standpoint. Despite all of the COVID issues that the community has had and that the rec has had, they have come out the other side financially in a much better place than anyone could have imagined that they would. So he's done a great job, and I will definitely pass along your comments to him.
And he also was instrumental in donating some of the equipment that we have in the gym. He asked me if we wanted some. He also, when COVID hit in that first week, he was concerned about whether or not we had disinfecting materials and supplies. And they donated cases of hand wipes they used to wipe the machines down because they were closed and didn't need them. And he gave them to us, and that really got us through until we were able to get a stockpile of our own stuff. So I just wanted to pass it on.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Ms. Garber, is there anybody online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one resident from the township who would like to comment, Christina Hausner from 3299 Randy Road. Christina, you have been unmuted.
Okay, Ms. Allison, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I wanted to just say I appreciated the board's response to the request to consider a resolution about a county health department. I thought that the sentiments you expressed and the action that you took was appropriate. And as I said, I appreciate that. But the reason for my comment this evening is just to let you know that my precinct, which is Indian Springs, votes at the Four Seasons banquet facility. And this year for the primary election, that location is being moved. And I am told, or we are told, it is because it is under construction, but there's also a question as to whether it will ever serve, even once construction is completed, as a polling place based on the tenants' response. And so I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board. I wasn't really clear myself what the status of the construction was, but I certainly learned this evening at the meeting that they're apparently, still waiting on air conditioning and other things. And there were also a couple of other districts in East Hempfield that are going to be moved, some temporarily, some permanently. So, and that was just my comment. And I would hope that, this is a township facility and that it could still be used for voting district, a polling place twice a year, once the construction is complete.
Do you know where they're temporarily moving you to?
Yeah, we're being moved to the Hempfield Rec Center. Yep. So that's, in fact, our precinct has voted there in the past. King's district, which voted at has voted at the Hempfield School District Administration Building, is moving to Vietnamese Alliance Church on Knolt Road.
Okay.
And this was a result of an election board meeting today. It won't be voted on or finalized for a week. So, it's still under consideration. And the other district that's being moved, polling places for the Spring District, where they currently vote at the Community Fellowship Church, 200 Bethel Drive. They're being moved to the Vietnamese Alliance Church.
So for the one at the rec center, that's also where the Mill Creek currently is at. So how are they going to handle two polling places in one location? Do you know that?
Well, no. Do I know that? Yeah, I don't know.
Did you hear any more about that? Are they got to use one entrance for one voting district and the other entrance for another voting district?
Don't know. I mean, there is a district that votes at the pro shop at the Four Seasons. And I thought, it would be good if we could have two precincts voting there, but I'm told that's too small because at least people would be in the same parking lot, but that's what I'm told. I'm sure that this will be worked out, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Garber, any other public comment on your end?
Not at this time.
Any more from the audience at this point? Okay. Well, seeing none. Anything more of the board? It's 8:45 and we will adjourn our meeting.